This is the full story of the maze in the Milton Hospital parking garage. Just west of Milton General Hospital is an unmarked parking garage. It connects to both Fallon's and the Milton General Hospital on multiple floors. On the ground floor, by the vehicle entrance, is a closed door with many arrows pointing at the door. What is this place? Who put it here? Let's explore the maze together, assemble all the evidence, and then at the end I'll tell you my theory. Just upon entry, we have two choices. We can turn right or we can go straight towards the arrow. If you turn right, you find a decapitated head on a table with candles and a beer next to apparently its body wrapped up in barbed wire. This immediately makes us think of raiders. These are the typical decorations that raiders will employ. You will find a lot of glowing fungus in this parking garage. Through a doorway next to the decapitated head is a small room, but before you enter, be sure to disarm the tripwire. As soon as you enter, 4 or 5 radroaches will jump you, one of which I have found is always legendary. In the back by the candle, we find a stash of caps and a small wooden crate. In the back of this room, we find another tripwire, and around the corner, we meet a dead end with a question mark on the wall. Now, where have we seen question marks like this before? At Poseidon Energy, which was also swarming with raiders. Heading back around and through the door with the arrow, we go down a hallway and round a corner to come face to face to a startling scene. 5 undressed mannequins staring right at us. Thankfully, these are all harmless. They're not part of any booby trap. I guess they're just here to frighten. At the end of this room, we have two choices. We can go left through the door with the arrows, or we can turn right. Let's go left through the door with the arrows. This leads us to a highly irradiated room filled with barrels of nuclear waste. Following along a bend leads us to another room filled with more barrels, and here we find a wooden crate and a stack of right-away end chems. But this is a dead end, so we go back and take the other path to the right. Here we find a door puzzle. On the wall, we see 3 switches, and above it, a blue piece of plywood with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 written. Now, someone, either the person who set up this maze or a wanderer who came here before you, has given you the key. We see arrows from the numbers pointing to the corresponding switches. Button 1 toggles doors 1 and 2, button 2 toggles doors 2 and 3, and button 3 toggles doors 3 and 4. I managed to get all of the doors open by first hitting button 2, hitting button 3, hitting button 2 again, and then hitting button 1. Passing through the doors and turning around the corner leads us to another split. Going straight leads to a dead end. On the right, we find some dead-end road signs and another question mark on the wall. Taking the right path leads us through a twisting corridor where we can follow the arrows until we get to a wall with an arrow pointing left and an arrow pointing right. There's a tripwire between the 2 wooden crates that's easy to miss, but thankfully all it does, if triggered, is emit a scary noise. To the left, we see the source of the noise, a speaker in the top right-hand corner next to heads on pikes. Turning right to continue through the maze, we come to another split. Taking the right path leads us to another split, either right towards a red door or left into a room with a bunch of cymbal-clacking monkeys. These are typically used as trap triggers, but thankfully in this room, they serve no purpose. They're just creepy. So I went through and destroyed each and every one of them. You can loot some chems, some brain fungus, and a toolbox, and then heading back we can open that red door, which reveals a turret in a shopping cart, which you need to take out quickly. In this room, we find a Christmas tree and Christmas lights. This is really rare. We only find the Christmas trees if you visit Diamond City during Christmas time, or if you build them in one of your settlements. Here we find a few minor chems, and then heading back, we can take the other path, which leads to a door that is littered with booby traps. If you ignore them and just walk right through, a whole bunch of fragmentation grenades, which are hanging from the ceiling, fall to the ground and explode. Instead, we painstakingly disarm each of these traps one by one. This is a great source of experience. Each trap will grant you a small amount of experience, 6 or 7, and you can disarm the tripwire, all of the pressure plates, and each of the hanging grenade blossoms. Heading on up, we find another tripwire connecting a Rocket 69 to a crate. If you accidentally trip it, a missile launcher in the next room fires, hitting you with a missile. The splash damage ignites oil on the floor, causing the entire room to erupt in flame. So this is definitely one trap to disarm. Now this section can get a little confusing, but it is fairly straightforward. If you go down the hallway where the oil was on the ground next to the car, you can follow it to the end, and to the left you're going to see an opening which will lead out. But you can fully explore this section by continuing onward. Turning left takes you down a hallway where you can disarm a gun trap and loot some brain fungus. Turning right takes you in a big loop towards where the missile launcher was, where you can loot the missile launcher and a toolbox at the bottom of the truck. This brings you back to the Rocket 69. Once the loop is complete, you can then go back down the hallway, take the first left-hand passage, and then here you can turn either left or right. Turning right takes you down a winding hallway until we find a sign on the wall with triple X's and an arrow to the left. If you follow the arrow, you can trip a tripwire, which will cause another scary sound. And for good reason. Here we find a pile of dead bodies. Note that these are not raiders, these are settlers, wanderers, traders, all piled up in the same spot. Now it is possible that these bodies will not be here in your gameplay. And the reason for this is because anytime you enter a cell in the world where Bethesda has placed dead bodies, a decomposition timer immediately starts. After 30 days, I'm not sure exactly what the unit of time is, the bodies will disappear from the world. The game thinks that you've already seen them once and that you don't need to see them again. But it's possible to enter a cell and not visit a place that has dead bodies, causing them to decompose by the time that you get there. I had to visit this maze with a character who had never been to the Roxbury area just to find these corpses. For all of my other characters, even if they had never visited the maze, these corpses did not exist. So we took the wrong way. Let's go all the way back, retrace our steps, and instead of turning right at the T, we turn left. We can follow this path around and up the incline to the next floor. Here we find blood streaks on the ground. This floor is a huge twisting maze. It doesn't really matter which way you go, because eventually you will get rushed by ghouls.
Come on!
One of these ghouls is always legendary, and one is always a glowing one, making this fight particularly tough at young levels. Once dead, you can find the ramp to the next level on the northwest corner of this floor. This brings you to yet another room that is heavily booby-trapped. This time, the booby-trapped scales and the tripwires are connected to Tesla traps. If you trigger them, arcs of electricity will shoot out to get you. Instead, you can disarm these one by one and even disarm all of the Tesla traps to get quite a lot of experience. Once all of the traps are disarmed, at the end of this room is a door that you can unlock by removing the bar that's keeping it closed. Here you can walk across a pedestrian bridge to a staircase which leads to Fallon's. This will take you to the roof or back down to the ground. Heading back, we find a Nuka-Cola machine, and you always find quite a tidy stash of Nuka-Cola here. You'll always get either one Nuka-Cola Cherry or Nuka-Cola Quantum, and then 4 or 5 regular Nuka-Colas, which are going to be great for crafting Overdrive. Turning around and continuing along the hallway, we come to a room with 3 doors. If you open the first one, you trigger a Tesla trap. Waiting for it to die down, you can open door number 2, where we find a standing mannequin. This is the way out. But curiosity will naturally get the better of us. What is behind door number 3? If you open door number 3, you trigger 2 gun traps. One is aimed directly at you, and the other is aimed directly at door number 2. You can duck out of the way to avoid getting hit, and then the second gun will shoot down the mannequin standing in door number 2. In this room, we find the body of a raider. This is the first raider corpse we have found in this garage. Notice the char marks on the ground. It looks like explosives have gone off here. I think this is going to be important to remember later. Also note that this room is open to the elements. It's right against a wall and can be fairly easily accessed by anyone on the outside. Upon entry, the path continues to the left where we find 2 tripwires. These are connected to makeshift bombs, which you'll need to disarm. When done, take a right towards the dead end sign where we find a corpse and a head on a pike. Follow this path around until you find a door in a shack to the left next to a welcome mat on a floor. Here we find somebody's bedroom, and on the box next to the bed is an issue of Hot Rodder Hot Pink. This is going to give you a new paint scheme that you can use to paint any type of power armor you wish, except Raider power armor. This gives you a hot pink paint scheme, which some may find to be garish, but it certainly is unique. In this room, we also find a weapons workbench, a landmine, a first aid kit, and 2 tool chests. Exit this room and go back the way you came to find 2 jail cells that look like they've been rigged up with explosives. Peering inside, we see a bunch of valuable goodies. The left-hand cell has 5 fusion cores, a mini nuke, a combat helmet, and a trunk filled with loot. The right one has a trunk filled with loot and a whole bunch of chems. Now we have to choose wisely. If you open one cell door, all of the contents in the other cell are incinerated by a flamethrower and a makeshift bomb, removing them from the world. Now if you're terribly unlucky, you can destroy all of this loot. If you open up the first door, and then before looting the contents of that room open up the second door, then both of the detonations will go off, destroying the loot in both rooms. Now you cannot loot all of the loot without using console commands to cheat, but there is a way to get most of the loot in the left-hand room without opening any of the doors. It requires a jetpack and some chems that slow time. Go back to the portion of the maze where you found the Tesla traps. Above the ramp leading down is a wall. The contents of these cages are on the other side of this wall. Now the right-hand wall has chicken wire covering holes in the wall, which leads to the cell that contains the fusion cores and the mini nuke. Using power armor and your jetpack, you can fly on up and then reach through the chicken wire to grab the mini nuke, the combat armor helmet, and loot the steamer trunk. Sadly, the fusion cores are still out of reach, and you can't loot them this way. But in this way, you can loot most of the items in the left-hand cell, and then go ahead and open up the door to the right-hand cell to destroy the fusion cores, and then loot the chems and other items in the right-hand cell. In terms of value, it really depends upon your game style. For my Institute character, she had plenty of fusion cores, but very few chems, so I chose the right cell. For my Brotherhood of Steel character, he tends to go through fusion cores more quickly, since he uses a Gatling laser and power armor, so for him, I chose the left cell. Once done, you can continue along the path until you find a door that is barred. Double barred with 2 bars. Activate these to lower them, and this leads you out on top of the garage where you find a bunch of cars. Here you can walk across a makeshift bridge, which brings you to a door to Milton General Hospital, or you can take a stairway near Fallon's down to the ground. So that is the Milton parking garage maze. It's an interesting and fun maze, but I've always felt that it was a little out of place. You know what it felt like to me? It felt like one of those dungeons that didn't make much sense, and you could tell was created by a game developer to add a little bit of challenge to the game. Like, jump over the pit, avoid the razor wall, grab the rope to clear the alligator swamp, and at the end save the princess, that sort of thing. It feels a little artificial. That is to say, it doesn't feel like something you would naturally find in the game, but rather it feels like it has been put together for our benefit by some godlike creature, like a game developer. However, I do think that there is a way to explain this away with lore. The first point is that the interior decorations are clearly Raider. We find settler corpses and heads on Raider pikes and held up in Raider barbed wire. We find a lot of chems, and Raiders are known to use a lot of chems. And we find some of the cryptic symbols that we typically find in Raider locations, like question marks and arrows. So I think it's clear that this place was put together by raiders or maybe a raider. Secondly, it appears to be a trap. Each companion has unique dialogue when you bring them here, and many of them comment on how it feels like a trap or how they feel like there's treasure at the end of it.
They built this place up to protect something. We need to find out what it is.
Good place to stage an ambush.
You sure you want to go any further?
and I think that's its purpose. I think it's supposed to lure wastelanders and scavengers inside with the hope of finding loot. I think every person who entered this door realized that they were walking into a death trap. They realized that they were entering a really dangerous place, but the allure of riches kept them going onward. Now at the very end, we did find that one room with the single bed and the weapons workbench. This, I think, was the private bedroom for that one dead raider whom we found in the nearby room. We also found fragmentation mines in that room. My bet is that this one raider took up residence inside the parking garage. He is the one who put together the maze and set up all of the booby traps, which is why he had the mine in his room. He went out of his way to make the place look like it held treasure, to entice scavengers to continue exploring. And then he made sure that every inch of the place was booby trapped so that they would inevitably be killed. This allowed the raider to then collect their corpses and loot anything that they had on their person before dumping the bodies in that one nook and then locking all of their loot behind the cages. However, one day super mutants came to Roxbury. We know that this area had been inhabited by raiders before. Inside Fallon's department store, for example, we find raider corpses all over the place, some of which were in the process of removing large safes, for example, that they were going to unlock later. But the super mutants rolled in, killed all of the raiders, and took up residence. This guy managed to hide away in his parking garage, but the super mutants outside continued to throw grenades or shoot missiles at him through the opening in the wall. These must have likely killed him, which is why there are explosive marks on the ground near his corpse, which just so happens to be next to an open window. Now, the only thing this can't explain is the existence of the ghouls. Ghouls may not attack ghouls, but they do attack raiders. There's no way one raider could take up residence at the top of this parking garage, which was infested with feral ghouls. There's no way he could go back deeper into the depths of his maze to loot and collect the corpses of wastelanders and scavengers who stumbled into his lair without being attacked by ghouls. That is to say, it's very unlikely that a raider would make feral ghouls part of his trap. So I really can't explain how the feral ghouls are there, other than that the developer wanted to put them there because that would make a much more interesting encounter. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is my best shot at trying to make this maze fit in with the lore of Fallout 4. But I'd love to hear your opinions. What do you think the true purpose of this garage was? Who do you think really put it together? Let me know in the comments below. I read all of your comments and I use them as inspiration for my future videos. If you've been following along with my series that explores the Roxbury area, we have a few more locations to cover, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when I publish those videos. If you'd like to chat with other like-minded individuals about this topic on the Oxhorn Community Discord server, be sure to click on that invitation link in the description of this video. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad that you're here watching this video today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning bright and early with a brand new video.